And welcome to Jekyll Geek's RPG Realm. I am Jekyll Geek, and this is my RPG Realm. If you were clicking on this video not by complete accident, you would probably guess that this is the my review of the Vagabond TTRPG and my general thoughts about the game. What is Vagabond, the tabletop RPG, you ask? It It's a game that builds itself as a pulp fantasy OSR style game, and that requires a bit of explanation. Since after playing it, I found that Vagabond is a bit different from other OSR games, even if it does maintain some of the main elements, is that it is very fast and quite a bit more deadly than 5th edition Dungeons Dragons, although it is not the deadliest one I have come across. The game itself is radically different than the basic expert Dungeons and Dragons with a few small tweaks. In fact, the first thing you look at is that the dice rolling mechanics is rather different, as predefined target number for all your skill and attack checks as well as magic checks, determined by what your stat and if you have the correct for the action that you're rolling for. Example, to hit an enemy with a melee attack that is not a finesse weapon, you have to roll over what is a 20 minus your might score, or if you have the training in melee weapons, twice your might score. For example, if you have a 5 might score, you have to roll over a 15 or a 10 if you have trained in melee weapons, like if you're a fighter or whatnot. And then if you make a successful attack roll, you roll your damage, which is just a die, usually not modified by anything, except for maybe if it's a magical weapon. Then it is subtracted by your enemy's armor, or if the enemy manages to hit you, it is your armor subtracted from the damage roll. And speaking of enemy damage rolls, the enemy is considered to always have hit your characters, but you make a defensive roll, usually a dodge or a block, usually depending on what your best stats is, to reduce that damage by one die. Experience with this damage mechanic is that a character with heavy armor and a good stat, especially at first level, which is what I played through, can feel really tanky, which does feel very nice. And if you're playing a fighter or a class that is similar to a fighter, you feel like you really do belong in the front lines, as opposed to some OSR games where if you're a first level fighter, you just feel like you're made up a slightly more durable version of tissue paper than the wizard character. But going back to skill mechanics, I found the other thing that this leads to is you don't really have to have a certain class to have your roles filled. You just need to have the right stats and the right skills. For example, you don't need a rogue to open your locks and check for traps. You probably just need the skill becomes your party's new rogue. In short, if what you like about OSR games is that they occur at a rather brisk pace and are fairly lethal, and this game is being Vagabond is a game that do hardly recommend because it does have that stats, as Vagabond does play very fast, even, and it is somewhat lethal, but it is not so lethal as you feel constantly on edge, like your character will always die. But yeah, eventually they may die if you take too many risks. Your character dies, you have to create a new one, which you have 18 choices in all your classes and about 8 ancestries to choose from, at least from the core book. And all these options, in my personal experience, really takes away a lot of this sting of dying. It's like when your character dies, it's like you're a kid and your toy breaks. Okay, some of you are adults, which really are your when it comes to tabletop RPGs, you're large kids that pay taxes, but still you're a kid and your toy breaks. But that feeling feels a lot better when you have 18 new types of classes, aka toys, to try to play. Since you, unless you're playing like solo play like me, you can really only play one character at a time. The characters in Vagabond. I'd like to pay attention to the next main feature I found really salient in this game is that each of the classes does feel unique, and each of the classes have about 7 features, 2 of the features being gained at level 1, and another feature being gained on every even level going up to level 10, which is this game's level cap. And on odd levels, you gain what is called a perk, uh, namely what Vagabond calls its feats. However, I found these feats and features are rather simple to play with, and even though you do get a lot of stuff to make your character unique, none of this does feel overwhelming. In short, the character customization in my mind makes Vagabond feel like a strangely rules light version of a third edition Dungeons and Dragons. I know that does sound a bit weird, but yeah, it does feel like that with the customizability. But it is something I really do love about this game. I say this also because looking through the book, there's more content in it than should be in the basic version and basic rule book of an OSR game. But it is only about a little over 200 pages, 214 pages of a book that not only comes with the player guide, but Dungeon Master rules, a sample adventure, a pretty decent bestiary, especially for a core book, but only at 214 pages. In fact, looking through it, I feel like I'm looking at a bag of holding in PG rule book form. And despite all of its content, the game does not it feels just as lightweight as any time I played, say, a basic or a Shadow Dark. Vagabond feels like some sort of mathematical impossibility, but it does exist, and I am just in awe of this game. And it should be noted that at the time of recording this video, the Kickstarter for expansion content for the Vagabond game is just about to be released, and of course, I am definitely going to buy this. Giving my final thoughts on the game, I would like to bring up the magic system, which is its own unique system where spellcasting classes get about 4 mana points per level, and they get only a few spells, but these spells they can be used to act in various ways, but to spend the mana required to make this spell improved in the ways described. Yet the spells themselves are described in a very minimalist sense, so you don't have to deal with a lot of rules bloat with even with your flexible spells. And I think that's it, except for my final thoughts on the game, which, if you're probably guessing whether I like it or not, I definitely do like it. I found this to be a very interesting, if slightly rules like game, which is definitely worth trying out. And in my opinion, it's not entirely a old school feeling game, but I say this in a good way because let's say you're a game master with mostly modern players and you're wanting to get them to try something a bit more rules like than, say, a fifth edition or a Pathfinder game. I found that Vagabond will probably be more palatable to those type of players than most OSR games, and I do recommend it at very least on those merits. Uh, Short as of this recording, I have played about 8 solo games in my eventual YouTube channel, although you probably haven't seen the videos of this. And this game is probably tied for first place. But this is the video, and I hope you find this slightly educational and somewhat entertaining. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.